Welcome to the Holistic Health Habits Podcast, where we explore the many facets of holistic nutrition and wellness. I'm your host, Sarani Fernando, and today we have a very special guest who has made significant strides in the world of vegan fitness and holistic health. I'm thrilled to welcome Ella Majors, the owner and founder of Sexy Fit Vegan. A vegan since 1995, Ella founded Sexy Fit Vegan in 2013 to pave the way for veganism to enter the mainstream by making it sexy. She's known for her holistic approach to fitness and nutrition, emphasizing a healthy relationship with food and fitness without the pitfalls of calorie counting and dietary restrictions. Welcome to the podcast, Ella. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on the show, Sarani.
Great. So just to start off, your story is super interesting. It goes back to when you were 7. Can you tell us just a little bit about your early journey as a vegan and how that's really sort of shaped your path to where you are now?
Sure, yeah. So I was just 7 years old and I got in the car after school one day and my mom asked how my day was. And I told her we learned about this guy named Daniel Boone. So if anyone doesn't know who Daniel Boone is, he's one of our first American folk heroes, and he was a wilderness guy, carried around a shotgun, wore a raccoon hat. And I told my mom, this guy was really mean. He's supposed to be a hero, but he killed animals and he ate them. And my mom kind of looked at me and said, well, Ella, we're just very fortunate. We don't have to do that ourselves anymore. We get to go to the grocery store to buy our meat. And it was at that moment that I really connected the food or the meat on my plate with the animal that it was. And yeah, I was horrified, and I told my mom, well, that's it. I'm never doing that again. And I never ate meat again. So that's how it all started.
Did you, miss it when you obviously grew up eating it? Was that an easy switch for you?
It really was. For me, it was just this idea of, and as kids, we look at animals and we see happy cows in books, and, we have this innate kind of connection to animals. And it was just this realization that I had that was what was on my plate. So all of a sudden for me, it just became completely unappealing. And so no, that wasn't an issue at all. In fact, I really knew kind of intuitively at that point that I wanted to be a voice for animals, that was kind of why I was here on Earth. And I started sharing about that with everybody that I could.
Yeah. And did you start off as a vegetarian, or was it straight into vegan, like you kind of understood the difference there? As a 7-year-old,
Yeah.
I mean, I can imagine it would be a bit steep.
Yeah, no, I didn't understand the connection with dairy and eggs yet. So I started out as a vegetarian. And by the time I turned 15 years old, I did make those connections, and I started to do my own research and understand the cruelty of the dairy and egg industry. So by the time I was 15, I was fully vegan. And this is, I was an athlete since I was 5. So I was doing all this, going to gymnastics practice 4 times a week for hours on end, and taekwondo and dance, and then volleyball. And so I've been an athlete really my whole life. So all this time it was eating the sides of the dishes on my parents' plate or on our dinner table. But pretty soon my parents kind of followed suit. And so we became a relatively plant-based household when I was in my teenage years.
Well, that's quite fortunate, because I can imagine, I mean, you grew up, in mainly the 90s, like 80s, 90s. I can imagine it was quite difficult to be a vegan. I mean, at home, if you're sort of making those choices, possibly, that's helpful. But just going out, being with friends, there's not a lot of vegan options on menus and things like that. Now there is, but back then, how was that for you?
Yeah, there was not a lot of options out there. And I made do because it was so rooted in this value of compassion. It didn't feel hard. I just sought out, the side dishes or whatever I could. I asked questions and I did the best I could with what I had. And yeah, at home, I always say, we didn't have a lot of choices out and about, but I almost feel really lucky that I got in before there was a lot of processed vegan foods. Mm-hmm. Because my only choices were basically whole foods, beans and tofu existed back then, and vegetables and fruits. And I was also very fortunate to have parents that were health conscious enough to help me navigate that, before I could do it myself.
Yeah. And you mentioned, the athlete part of it. I always think when I think of, athleticism at its highest, I think of, Novak Djokovic, how he just had this massive transformation with his performance just because he realized what he was eating wasn't, you know, doing well with his body, and he felt better with doing plant-based. And I think that's been a big, proof that, I mean, we'll get a bit more into, listening to your body and figuring out what works best for your body. But, big proof that you can be, at the top of your performance and just be eating plants. So
Absolutely. Yeah. The athletes nowadays that are moving in that direction and seeing benefits in not only their performance, but their recovery time and inflammation and all of that is pretty extraordinary.
yeah. And, so I guess that background got you into the health sort of, you developed an interest in health. How did your fitness journey start and getting into the fitness world and being a personal trainer?
Yeah, so I actually went to school and graduated with a degree in social work. Not because I wanted to be a social worker, but because I knew I wanted to be in service to humanity in some way, shape, or form. So it seemed like a good approach. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. But right after college, had always been into sports and fitness. So I went ahead and jumped into the fitness industry. I had a boyfriend at the time who had a health club consulting company. So I started working with him, and I got certified as a personal trainer, started doing training, really enjoyed it, started teaching, was the fitness director at gyms. And I ended up actually competing. I wanted to, at that time still, this is in the early 2000s, like 2002, 2003. And, a lot of people didn't even know what the word vegan was back then. Mm-hmm. And so this was kind of my new way of promoting veganism or a plant-based diet, was becoming this kind of shining example of the physique that most people wanted. Mm-hmm. And people would come up to me and ask me what I was doing to get so strong and lean. And I would be able to share with them, my nutrition habits and what I knew about that, as well as, helping them with their workouts. And that's when I decided to compete in a bodybuilding competition in the bikini division, and ended up winning first place in the bikini division of the Fame World Championships, really just to prove at a time when, most people didn't think that was possible, that you could have a strong, muscular, lean physique on plant protein alone.
Yeah. Okay. Your whole story involves that then going into like the falling under the pressure and then, having some struggles with that pressure. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and, that part of the journey?
Yeah, sure. So at that time, I was surrounded by bodybuilders and who were obsessed with protein and terrified of carbs. And I was really trying to meet the same macro counts, because back then, again, there was just not a lot of information out there about how to do the plant-based thing correctly, right? So I was really trying to meet those same macro counts, and I got very obsessive and very restrictive. And, the bodybuilding culture really normalizes disordered eating in a lot of sense. A lot of my friends would, have extreme restriction Monday through Saturday, and then on Sunday it would be this day-long binge on things like pizza and donuts. So it was really unhealthy on so many levels. We think about the fitness industry, we want to think it's about health, but really it's often about what we look like, on the outside. So I would restrict as long as I could. And although I didn't eat donuts or pizza, my willpower would run out like anyone's does. And I'd end up binging on things like nuts and cereal. And sorry, we are having an incredible thunderstorm out here.
Oh, okay. So actually, we might as well. There's been some, okay. It's been hot and then thunder. So
yeah. So there were nights, there was a night I remember eating an entire jar of peanut butter in one sitting, and then hating myself for it and then starving myself for it to make up for it. So as healthy and kind of in shape as I looked on the outside, there was a lot going on in the inside. And I really hid that the best I could from everyone, because I wanted to be this shining example of health.
Yeah. And that's so interesting that someone, and, people in the fitness industry, I think people on the outside look to these people like personal trainers, people who are giving advice as though they've got everything sorted, they've got so much discipline and we just need to be like them. But yeah, I guess everyone is human and there are pressures. And, I think it just reminds us to, have grace with ourselves in terms of we can't, be that perfect, perfect human. It's okay to have slip ups, so just get back on that horse and also not putting so much pressure on yourself. I mean, as women, we just are constantly under the scrutiny where we're judged by that outside, look versus, what's on the inside. And especially I grew up in the 90s as well, born in the 80s, grew up mainly in the 90s when it was the magazines and the stick figures and things like that. And I was a 10-year-old, curvy 10-year-old going through puberty. And yeah, it's, I think there's a lot of things that we as humanity need to think about when we're projecting these ideals on people. Because if it's impacting people like you, like who we think is a shining example, then yeah, we're doing something wrong for sure. So how did you get out of that? What was the snap moment?
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily this, one aha moment. It was gradually kind of it was a realization that I had so much compassion for everyone else and for animals. And, there was this realization that, oh, wait a minute, I'm really lacking that compassion for myself. Mm-hmm. And there was that realization. And part of that was, training clients. At that time, I was personal training pretty much full time. And it was seeing that in some of my clients that helped me reflect and see that in myself. And that's when my healing journey really began. I went back to school, got my master's degree in social work, and I started practicing yoga. Which was really hard for me at the time because I was this, very tough woman. I was a Muay Thai practitioner. I was sparring. I was weightlifting. I was a go-getter, doer, and to really slow down and to focus on the being over the doing was really hard for me. But I was really breaking down my body with all the training I was doing. So I kind of forced myself into yoga, but gradually started to embody that mindfulness and started to learn more about myself and approach myself with curiosity and compassion. So I started to see movement as medicine as well, and just started shifting my whole relationship. And at that point, everything changed for me, and it started my new.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about your business, your coaching business, and, also your Reboot 22 program?
Yeah, sure. So I specialize in working with people that have an unhealthy relationship with food in their bodies. And so instead of, one of the things that differentiates me is that I don't ask for before and after photos because we're not focused necessarily on the outcome. The outcome's going to come, what we do is focus on the process. We focus on each step of the way. We focus on discovering blind spots. We focus on the subconscious programs that are keeping us stuck in unhealthy habits and really getting to the root why we're choosing foods and choosing to move or not move our body in ways that are not aligned with what we want for ourselves, which are not aligned with holistic health. So we work on really getting to the root of that and then learning some tools for self-coaching, coaching ourselves through so that we can create new habits and new patterns that equate to a lifestyle that's really aligned with health on every level, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. So that's what we do in our coaching program, in the coaching I do. And then the 22 Reboot program I created really to have a very simplified, quick and easy system for people to go through over 22 days that is founded on a few principles, the 4 principles of holistic health. And that includes nutrition, movement, mindfulness, and sleep. And so we learn some really powerful tools each day with 5 to 10 minute videos, resources along the way that help you make choices that will really up-level your health holistically.
And what should you see at the end of those 22 days? Are there goals that your clients have? What are some examples of what type of clients come to you?
Yeah, so it's really rebooting your sleep habits. So understanding sleep hygiene and making those conscious choices each night to help yourself get great night's sleep, because a lot of choices that we make during the day are so much harder, right, when we don't get a good night's sleep. So sleeping better, people's, it's been really extraordinary that in just 22 days, people's numbers in terms of blood pressure and cholesterol, even some of these markers have already begun to improve pretty dramatically for some people. There's been weight loss in just 22 days. And again, this is not a program where you're counting calories or macros, but you're really looking at making choices that are aligned and looking at those habits and learning how to coach yourself into new habits. So really, and we chose 22 days. They say it takes 21 days to change a habit. So 22 days, you own it. And it's intense, yet doable. You're asked to do 60 minutes of movement a day. I have a guided mobility routine. So this is not just about, going for the hardest core workout, but this is also getting in tune with your body and learning how to make intuitive choices about how you move and how you eat. There are resources on creating meal planning that is easy, that doesn't take a lot of time in the kitchen. This is really designed for busy people, busy professionals. So I've got great resources on there. I'm not somebody who loves to spend a lot of time in the kitchen, and yet I know I'm kind of a master at getting things done quickly, but also healthfully. So you get all those resources. You do some journaling along the way, and I guide you through every step.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And is there a success story, like one of your clients that you might be able to share a turnaround?
Yes, well, in my one-on-one coaching, I've got a couple on the website as well. But I think Bonnie was one of the big ones. She had some disordered eating in her past, but she felt like she had kind of overcome that to a large degree. But she still had about 10 pounds that she really wanted to lose. She didn't feel great about herself. She felt like she was making pretty good choices. She's actually an addictions therapist. And so she's got a lot of the tools, but she just had some blind spots that she couldn't see herself. And that's the thing about blind spots. They're hard to discover yourself. But when you have a coach asking the right questions, that's the whole thing about coaching. It's you get to be challenged with these questions that help you discover the answers, because really only you know the answers, but you need to be asked the right questions. So yeah. I worked with her. I helped her with her training plan, her nutrition, just really tweaking some things, and then some mindset shifts about how she was looking at her choices. And by the end, she had finally lost, and she had been trying to lose those 10 pounds for, I think, the last 20 years. And she finally lost them. And now a year later, she's kept them off and feels great about her body.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's the main thing, doing it, but then also maintaining it, because, you see yo-yoing of, these crash diets, and then everyone's just lost. So I guess moving on to practical tips. So for those people listening who, have decided they want to start their journey towards a vegan lifestyle, what would be some practical tips and best practices you would recommend, to avoid common pitfalls and build a sustainable, healthy habits in life? I think one of the things you mentioned earlier was, the amount of ultra processed vegan food that's out there. And I feel like that might be the biggest stumbling block for people. But yeah, if you want to share some tips.
Yeah, actually, the first tip I have is really around mindful eating, which is not very sexy sounding. And it can make the biggest difference in the world, starting with chewing your food thoroughly to a paste before swallowing and really paying attention. So for, let's say, let's say 22 days, I'm going to challenge anyone listening to eat undistracted, at least one meal a day to start. Eat undistracted, really paying attention to your food, looking at the food, using all 5 of your senses to connect with the food. Where did this food come from? What's this food about to do for me? How is it going to nourish me or harm me? Really connecting with that. And then as you put the food in your mouth, you taste it, you chew it, you feel the texture, you smell, and you think about what that food's going to do in your body. And creating that connection with your food is going to really help you start to pay more attention and make choices. Also, chewing your food to a pace, which doesn't sound, that appealing, right? Like I always say to make a smoothie in your mouth with your food before you swallow, which sounds pretty gross. But the difference it can make is huge. I mean, a lot of people, even I, before I started mindful eating, had a lot of bloating issues after meals. A lot of people struggle with that. A lot of people struggle with eating past the point of being full, right? Eating more than your body is nourished. So even without counting calories, we can know that by eating slowly, by chewing your food, you can start to recognize when your body's full, recognize your satiety signals, and stop eating before you get overly full when you're fully satisfied. And right then and there, you're going to cut out without having to count and spend all this energy and time, tracking. You're going to cut out a lot of calories right there just by not overeating.
Right.
Mindful eating is a really, really powerful tool that's made a huge difference in my own life and the life of a lot of my clients as a great place to start.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about this before with the macros. There is a lot of conversation with all the health influencers out there. You've got vegan diet, the carnivore diet, and everything in between. And, with the conversation about veganism, there's a lot of talk about where do you get the protein from, and, the struggles to get enough protein, the struggles to get enough of the essential amino acids into your diet. What would you say to that? And how do you circumvent those challenges? Do you see it as a challenge? Do you see it as, something that's not so much of an issue?
Yeah, and it really does depend on your goals. Are you trying to really gain a lot of lean muscle? Then yes, we need more protein. And I'm not saying it's not helpful sometimes to figure out how much protein you're getting and to be very knowledgeable about nutrition and about where protein comes from and plant-based sources for protein. So all those things are very important. I'm just saying we don't necessarily need to spend all this time and energy tracking every calorie put in the body, right? So choosing food, so in creating this way of eating with the help especially of a coach, but you can do it on your own, to make these choices. So if you're not eating legumes, soybeans, tempeh, or choosing a really clean plant-based protein to supplement with, those are things that are important if you're on a plant-based diet and you're training and you want to build muscle. So we've got to get those things in the diet. So it's about making the most of the calories that you do have, really packing that in, both the micronutrients, which are very, very important, getting in all your vitamins, minerals, which you can really do for the most part by eating a wide variety of plant foods, eating lots of different types of vegetables and fruits and legumes, and then cutting out, when you're trying to get the most nutrient density. We talk about getting the most bang for your caloric buck, right? Getting the most nutrient density in fewer calories, especially if you are trying to lose the weight as well. So for example, I eat a salad for breakfast, which sounds, to a lot
that sounds good to me. I'm about that. I like vegetables.
Oh my God. Yeah. It has changed my life. Just thinking outside the box. It's these programs that say, here's what a breakfast food is. And most of those breakfast foods are crap. They set you up for terrible nutrition, right? Yeah. So instead, I eat my first meal of the day is this kale salad that I make. I put this nutritional yeast on it that has 4 grams of protein, 4 tablespoons of nutritional yeast within the salad with lemon juice and some white beans or different types of beans and some pumpkin seeds on top. This one little salad, which tastes delicious, has almost 30 grams of protein in it, in a salad. Yeah. So it's really about thinking outside the box and not just going with the norm. And really starting to say, how can I get the most bang for my caloric buck? How can I pack in the most micronutrients? And if I'm training and wanting to build muscle, how can I also make sure to get max plant protein in those meals as well?
Yeah. And, you mentioned your breakfast. What would be a typical day after that for you? Like, where you get all your macros that you need. Obviously, you're not counting them, but you as a person know what your go-tos are.
Sure. Yeah. So, and I go through kind of phases because I'll get bored and then I'll change it up. So right now I actually am starting my day off. I train at around 9:30 in the morning. I'm up around 4:40, 4:44 is when my alarm goes off. So in between there, I'm first drinking 32 ounces of water with lemon in it. I have a supplement called Live Ultimate. It's these highly powerful greens that I use in the water as well. And then I have been using a plant-based protein called Phyta. which dissolves right into hot water. So instead of coffee, it's a protein that's upcycled barley made by the same people that created the movie Game Changers, which is a great documentary if you guys haven't watched it. So James Cameron was one of the producers there, and my friend James Wilkes is the main character in that movie. Anyways, his protein, it's a great protein. So right there, I'm getting 30 grams of protein to start my day. I go train, come home and eat my kale salad, which has, like I said, 30 grams of protein. And then I listen to my body, like, so I don't have like, oh, now 2 hours later I eat. If I'm hungry 2 hours later, I will have a snack. That could be chickpeas with avocado and tomato. Something like that is often an afternoon snack. Sometimes apple with peanut butter or almond butter. Dinner, it's sometimes a bonza pasta. So instead of white pasta, if I'm going to do a pasta, I'm going to do a legume pasta. So a pasta made out of chickpeas or a pasta made out of mung beans, which has 25 grams of protein in the pasta alone. So add that and add some tofu and sauteed spinach and zucchini and get all these different vegetables and broccoli in there. Again, I'm having another 30, 40 grams of protein. So it's so much easier once you have that kind of way of eating mastered to get in all the protein. And it's phenomenal.
Yeah. And I think what you said about, doing something and then changing it up, I feel like that's a really good tip to have some go-tos where you just know the amount, the general range of everything you're getting, your protein, your fiber, your carbs, your fats, and then just like repeat it because until you get bored, because, it's just easier. Sometimes it can just be so hard to be like, what am I going to have for dinner today? And then think about it, So I think if you just have it on autopilot, it makes it so much easier to get what you need.
1,000%. Like the salad, some days I use kale, some days I use arugula. The general mix of it is pretty similar. I just mix up the greens and do a different bean and do a different flavor. You add a different flavor profile and a salad can feel like a completely different salad, even though most of the ingredients are really similar.
Yeah. And what would you say are the most common issues your clients face when, they come to you for one of your programs or your coaching and they want to transition into a vegan lifestyle? How do you help them overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes it's family. That's a big one for people. Yeah. Social, family, having their household not on board. And especially for women feeling like, okay, well, now I have to keep making the same dinner for my family. And now I've got to make a second dinner and I'm working full time. And how am I supposed to make two separate dinners? And for me, and in my podcast, the Vegan Life Coach podcast, Stephanie is my co-host there, and she helps me with the group coaching program. She's a mom, and she talked about when she made the transition, she said, hey, I'm making one dinner, and it's going to be a healthy dinner, and it's going to be a plant-based dinner. And if you don't like it, you can go in the kitchen. I'm not a short order cook, and you can go in the kitchen, you can make yourself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then that can be your dinner. So really, taking ownership in the fact that this is a healthy choice that you're making for your family. They may not like it, but they might have choices. They can make another choice if they want to. It doesn't have to be all up to you to meet everybody's needs.
Yeah. Just with the growing popularity of veganism now, you're getting a lot of restaurants and cafes, lots of products that are out there. How have you navigated that and educating your clients about what to avoid when it's just, a label of veganism? These are some of the pitfalls. I know that there's, a really amazing donut place that's in my neighborhood it's vegan, but obviously there's a lot of bad stuff in there.
Yeah.
So, to eat on a regular basis just to be like fueling my needs as a vegan.
One of the tips that I use with my clients is to pause. We call it the power pause, right? To pause before you make a choice about what you're going to eat, before you put anything in your mouth, and say, what would the best version of myself choose? Or what would I choose if I really loved myself, right? Because we think about veganism, it's all about compassion. And if we're having compassion for ourselves, we're making choices that are good for our bodies, that are good for ourselves, that are going to help us, live long, healthy lives, right? So looking at foods that are packed with sugar or, processed oils or processed grains and flours, these sorts of things are not going to help us live long, healthy lives. So just because it's vegan doesn't make it healthy. So look at those ingredients and make a choice. And it doesn't mean you can't have a treat every now and then, right? We don't want to get to that point, but to say, and if we do make that choice, like, you know what, I'm going to treat myself to this vegan donut today.
Yeah.
Then just, eat that donut mindfully, enjoy every bite, chew that donut, say how delicious it is, take your time and don't feel guilty about it, right? Because then we set ourselves up to feel bad. And what happens when we feel bad about ourselves? We end up making even worse choices, or we say, I already screwed up, so I'll just eat 3 donuts, and I'll start fresh tomorrow. How often do we say that? I'll start fresh Monday. I'll start fresh next month. No, we get choice every moment to start fresh and make new decision. So,
yeah, that's great advice. I think moderation and also just being kind to yourself and rewarding yourself and enjoying it. I think that's the best part of it, is just to embrace those moments where you can have a treat. Well, this has been super interesting, Ella. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. It's been inspiring to learn about your holistic approach to fitness and vegan living, and also just hearing about your super colorful journey, starting off really strong and then having some struggles and then, coming back and, sort of reinventing yourself and your business. So for those interested in learning more about Ella and her programs, be sure to visit ellamajors.com and sexyvegan.com. And don't forget to subscribe to Holistic Health Habits for more episodes on holistic wellness and nutrition. Until next time, I'm Sarani Fernando. Take care and stay healthy.